value and objectivity, which is the this is the fourth subunit. Now look at some of the questions. Is sociology a value-free science? Discuss. What is value-free sociology? Clarify. How is objectivity different from value neutrality? Discuss with reference to Weber's views on methodology. So Weber is somebody who's quite clearly value-free sociology, keeps coming back, value neutrality, objectivity. So these remain some important cues for us in order to prepare vis-a-vis the PYQs, in order to kind of get ready for the sort of questions that are being asked. Now, very quickly, let's just get some clarity on what is fact, what is value, and then we move on to fact-value dichotomy, the problem of objectivity, and so on. Now, fact, if you're looking at Good and Hart, Goode, and Hart, Hatt. So if we are looking at fact, just fact. So in this, according to Good and Hart, fact is, simply put, an empirically verifiable observation. That's how they define fact. So facts are those situations or circumstances concerning which there is no room for disagreement. So as we say, a fact is a fact, no room for disagreement. Facts actually dictate agreement. They are incontrovertible. They dictate agreement. So fact could refer to an objective reality. Fact has its own existence. Fact can refer to something that actually happened. Fact can refer to something that is or that can be empirically tested and verified. And fact is also something that cannot be denied. So these are some important components of fact. If you're looking at value, basically values have to do with shared agreements or shared ideas. And Blackwell Dictionary of Sociology tells us that values can be used to rank virtually anything. So when you're talking about values, so ranking, yeah, for example, if in terms of abstractions, you can always value logic over intuition. In terms of objects, you can always value gold over silver or copper or whatever. In terms of experience, you can always say loving and losing is always ranked higher than never loving at all. Behavior, truth telling is always above lying. Personal characteristics or personal attributes varies from society to society, but let's say fair over dark, tall over short. And then states of being, healthy is always considered as better or more cherishable as compared to illness or health, illness, etc. So what in each of these cases, whether you're looking at abstraction or experience or behavior or personal characteristics, what you have is we are ranking things. So what makes the idea a value is its use to rank things in relation to one another. Now, some of the core characteristics of values are: a value is a preference. Values deal with ought to and not is. So values are dealing with ought to. Fact deals with is. Right? Values deal with ought to and not is. Values are not absolute. They vary from people to people. They vary from time to time. And values are about right and wrong. They are not about true and false. So a value is not about true and false. A value is about right and wrong, right? So that's, now if you come to value, fact value dichotomy, again, a possible fact value dichotomy. So basically we have to go back to early years of sociology. Fact and value have always been considered as polar opposites. So fact is, let's say, day, values are night, right? Something like that. There is not just a distinction between fact and value, but also a sharp separation, some sort of a dichotomy, an unbridgeable gap, as we say. For example, if you look at sociology, now values have been looked at differently by different schools of thought. So there are different vantage points. If you're looking at positivists, positivists discard values. they term them as impediments to true and authentic knowledge. If you carry on with your values, you will never be able to arrive at true, authentic, solid knowledge, because values are impediments. If you look at practitioners of interpretive method, well, values are considered as extremely important. The job of a sociologist is to make sense of values and meanings and so on through empathy, through, as it were, crossing the axis. If you look at functionalists, now functionalists maintain that the social system cannot survive without value consensus. Durkheim has written on this, Parsons has written on this. It's very important, values. Marxists are very clear. They assert that values invariably favor the dominant class. That is the bourgeoisie, the capitalists. Feminists are also very clear. Just like Marxists, they of course have their own reference. They say values are inherently patriarchal, and they always work against the interests of women. Now, when it comes to the fact value connection, dichotomy, relationship, etc., in the beginning, if you look at sociology and sociological research, in the beginning it was said that to study the facts properly, values are to be discarded. You need to keep your values aside. If you do not keep your values aside, your studying of the facts will not be authentic. It won't be the proper, the right, appropriate study. So, but under the influence of Max Weber, later, sociologists began to ask that can facts be studied without getting influenced by values? Is it really that easy for any individual to keep values aside? You can always keep those values aside that you are aware of, but then there are many values that we are not aware of. So how do you keep those aside? So this was an important question that many sociologists started asking, starting with Weber, that can we really keep our values aside? So it was then pointed out that, boss, somehow it seems impossible to be absolutely value free. And therefore they said that as opposed to this obsession with discarding them, what we can always do is we can study and try and understand them so as to understand social life better. So this was proposed. Now, basically, now when it comes to, because an important figure in this regard, of course, is Max Weber. And I'll just share with you a very important statement that he made. And Ralph Dahrendorf has referred to it. So Ralph Dahrendorf wrote a book, Dahrendorf, Dahrendorf. He wrote a book, Max Weber and Modern Social Science. And in that he writes that Max Weber was very clear, statements of fact are one thing and statements of value are another. These are two different things. And he says any confusing of the two is impermissible, meaning values are values, facts are facts. You cannot bring them together. If you confuse them with one another, it's a major problem. Now, Max Weber maintained a two-tiered approach. It's a two-tiered approach, meaning he has two levels at which he operates when it comes to fact-value association. Now, on the one hand, he believed, Max Weber was very clear, that ultimate values could not be justified scientifically. Whether they can be justified in other ways or not, he does not get into that. He says, scientifically, you cannot justify ultimate values. So basically, there cannot be a value-free analysis. For example, if you're comparing different religions, what happens? If you're comparing different political or social systems, what happens? You will always have a certain basis. And on the basis of that particular aspect, you will then maybe rank religions or compare political systems. So he says one system cannot be chosen over another without taking a value. So when you say gold is better than lead, then you are basically looking at worth and you're not looking at applicability, because there is a possibility that lead might be more useful for human society. I'm just making an argument. But there is always a basis, and on this basis is value. So on the basis of that, you go ahead and say this is better, this is not so good. So one system cannot be chosen over another without taking a value, right? So Weber says that ultimate values cannot be justified scientifically. On the other hand, Weber believed that once a value or purpose had been established, then a social scientist can always conduct a value-free investigation. So you need to establish, you need to become conscious of your value, and then perhaps you can embark upon a value-free investigation. So he made it very clear, and he repeatedly urged fellow sociologists, social scientists, students of sociology, that it is important to clarify for themselves, for sociologists, it is important to clarify for themselves and for others the values driving their investigations. So this is an important prerequisite to objective analysis of facts. So for an objective analysis of fact, you first put on record your values, right? That's something that Weber is talking about. So when the analyst fails to clarify and consciously acknowledge his values, it is unlikely that he can conduct the subsequent analysis impartially. So he uses a very interesting phrase. He says, the acknowledgement of a value orientation is the prerequisite to objective evaluation. Remember this, the acknowledgement of a value orientation is a prerequisite to objective evaluation. Now, lastly, the problem of objectivity. The problem of objectivity. Now, objectivity also has been quite an interesting, important key term. And for a very long time, sociologists held that, sociology had to be objective exactly the way natural sciences are, but it did not really go on for long. So there are several reasons we can have because of which objectivity is not really easy to maintain in sociological research. So the first is sociological judgments are colored by actors' own experiences. So it's very difficult to do away with that. Research techniques are compromised because of the investigator's subjectivity. That also happens. Theories are produced by social groups. If theories are produced by social groups, then there is already some possibility of subjective whatever investment. And then when you are talking to respondents, respondents do not check their subjectivity, which is why the data that we receive from them is hardly ever free of value judgments. So that's another concern. Now, how can we ensure objectivity? So we can restrict value judgments. Sociologists should be clear about their own values. Sociologists should not advocate any particular value or any particular values. And according to Wilfredo Pareto, the elite theorist, sociologists should concentrate on what is and not on what ought to be. So if sociologists were to restrict himself to what is, then there is a possibility that values will not really be entering into the domain of sociological research.